Hey everyone, how's it going today? I wanted to show you a video of how to replace your Pillowball bearing. So this is the part number right here. And I'm going to take you through step by step. I believe there is another video on YouTube, but it didn't really take you into every single part of the process. So I wanted to actually make one myself to kind of show you everything that goes into it. Now, of course, the first thing you want to do is jack up the car, remove your tire, locate where your airline is, and really the biggest thing is release the airline first. Now, you can't just cut it or pull it apart because your bag is pressured, so you actually have to go into your car and release that pressure manually. So what I'm doing now is just releasing all of the pressure from the bag, that way I can make that disconnect. So now I have the air hose line removed, basically separated from the bag itself, and I guess the feed from my tank. Now, like I said too, once you relieve that pressure, there was literally no air that came out whenever I made that separation, so it fully relieved all the pressure out of here. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and take off, I believe this is a 10 millimeter here. Hold your brake line. I need to remove my brake duct, probably won't have that. Then also looks like this sensor here, or sensor clip. Now I have this kind of holder removed here. This was a 12 millimeter. Have this clip undone, have my hose disconnected, ready to move on to the bolts down here. Now these are both 19 millimeters, and this does play an impact, I guess, with your alignment. So what I'm going to do is just make marks on all of these bolts. That way whenever I put them back the same way they came off. So as you can see, the bottom bolt, top bolt, have it marked, and then have the nuts. The top one had a washer as well, so I have that all removed. Now, in order to get these bolts out, they're a little difficult, as well as this part here will want to drop once you pull the bolts out. So the best way I found to go about it is put a jack underneath. That way, if you give it a little bit of a lift, these bolts seem to come out pretty easy. As well as whenever you're ready, you can slowly lower the jack to take down this whole arm here. It's only been 1 minute since I actually did my last clip here, and the reason why I wanted to film again is I want to give you a tip. Whenever you're using this jack here, you can lift it up a little bit, but if these bolts are hard to get out, all you have to do is simply just tap it with a hammer. I'm not even hitting it, so the tip is either put pressure to raise or relieve some pressure to lower to get to the exact height you need to be to take these bolts out perfectly. And the bottom one I was able even just to do by hand. So pretty simple, and make sure you're not just fighting, hammering away at it, because you're going to damage those bolts. Now I have replaced the ring, I guess you could say, on the opposite air lift, and this is something that kind of leads me to believe that this one's out too. Whenever it moves like this, it's probably worn out. So I work now to release the 3 top bolts and be able to pull this strut out. So to remove the strut, it's all pretty straightforward. You simply undo the 3 bolts, leave them loose, show support on the bottom kind of by grabbing it, pushing up a little bit, and then removing the bolts completely, then removing your strut. And now the strut out, and as you can see, it wiggles pretty easily. It's not supposed to do that. So I'll start taking it apart here. First is take off this damper knob here, and then start working on the bolt. So I'm actually gonna take out these hex bolts first. They're all 5 millimeter, and as you can see, I already marked where they need to be, so whenever I put it back, I know exactly what to do and where they go. Now I have the bolts removed, and I'd say they were a pain in the butt to break loose for some reason. And so now I'm going to work taking out this top bolt here. Should be able to remove everything from there. I just took this off, and as you can see there's some Loctite on there, so it's on there pretty good. And this was a 17. Just use my impact gun, and you just kind of hit it a little blast at a time. Although you do, or you're supposed to have that Allen key in there, just using a wrench, which would be impossible since it's so tight. You'd be able just to break it loose with that impact gun. So you can see that bearing in there is pretty messed up. Next step is to remove these 4 3mm hex bolts. These are the ones that are pretty difficult, so I may spray it with some PB Blaster, let it sit a little bit, and then try to attack it. So I'm able to get these bolts out. It took a little bit, as you can see right here. I had to use a Dremel, basically set it up for a flathead screwdriver. From there I was able to get it out. Made a kind of a poor cut initially, so I had to fix it. So that one's actually my worst one, but I had 2 come out, and then 2 I had to use a Dremel on. So at this point, yeah, just use some vice grip pliers to hold on to that. Taking me a little break because this is definitely the hardest part. And once that top's removed, we'll start working on the bearing. So now I have the cover off. Simply turn this over, find a way to be able to kind of stabilize this. So I'm just using this as an example, but where you would have the middle portion open, then I just take a 17mm and use a hammer to slightly tap on it until you knock it out. So what I did was actually just use the end of an extension, set that in there and just tap on there. I was able to get this one out. As you can see, it's pretty thrashed compared to what the new one here looks like. So your kit comes with your top nut for your strut, some Loctite for this nut, then your Pillowball bearing. So pretty much all you do is just put the new one in, put your cover back on, doesn't matter which way you do it. And so I'll work on now. I'm going to grease the inside just to make it a little bit easier for this to seat. So I have the new bearing seated, and one thing I do want to recommend is you don't take a hammer and hit directly onto that. What I did is I had a 21mm, put it on the outside, that way the center bearing area was safe, and just tapped it in. So when you look on your strut, you had this one on top, your ball. I'll go ahead and just kind of put that one back in there. But what you'll do is just kind of seat it on there, push it all back in, and then put your bolt back on with some Loctite. Thankfully, like I said, I gave you a new one here. So thread it on and just crank down on it with the impact. Now that I have the bolt tightened up, next is just put on the plate. And like I said before, I'd marked everything, so the thing to look at is you do have different holes, so make sure you put it on the right holes here, and you can kind of see the indentation on that already, so it's pretty easy just to kind of tell where it needs to go. So I have my top on, and it's all pretty easy now. Made sure to put the damper adjustment back on. This little silver piece, you just unscrew it, and that's how you get it off and on. Just screw it back on. So now I'm going to set the strut back, make sure whenever you're fighting with it that you have all your bolts, or I guess your nuts ready on the top side. That way you can get it all tightened down, or at least secure it enough to where you can maneuver it. So the strut connector now is pretty easy if you just feed it from the bottom and look at these little holes in the top. That way you can just kind of slide it through and be able to tighten it down. So this is something that you don't torque too much. I believe the spec was 38 foot-pounds, so it doesn't need to be too much. So I'm going to tighten that down, put my little cap back on, and start moving on to the bottom side. Now take a look. Before it was real loose. Now whenever I push it, it's staying in place. You want to make sure that you clear of these lines before going back with everything, but pretty much now what I'm going to do is just raise everything up, fit my bolts back in, tighten them down. So now I have my bolts put back in, have my brake cooler hose attached, have my brake line screwed back in with the 12mm, and have my air line connected. Now what I'm actually going to do is just pump air into the line manually using my remote and make sure that there's no leaks before I seal that back up. So pretty much all done. Not bad of a project, but just requires quite a bit of time. So I have my hose here connected. It was leaking a little bit, but had to tighten it down. Basically just wrap it up and put the tire on and I'm done. So I have everything all up and going. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, feel free to message me on Instagram at WRX Snowboarder or leave a comment below. As always, happy driving and enjoy.